So King Charles basically blew up Queen Camilla's biggest plan to get her son an official royal title, and the fallout is honestly messier than anyone expected. We're not talking about a polite disagreement here. This is the kind of cold, calculated palace drama that completely rewrites the family dynamic. The most fascinating part isn't even the rejection itself. It's what Camilla did after she got told no, because that's where the story takes a turn into something genuinely wild. If you're enjoying the deep dives into royal chaos like this, hit subscribe to Crown Watch. It genuinely helps us keep doing what we do. Now, let's get into why this situation doesn't add up in the way the palace probably hoped it would. The whole thing kicked off in a way that sounds like a scene from a period drama, but I promise this is all based on what actually happened behind those very old, very thick stone walls. Camilla sat across from Charles in a leather armchair at Clarence's house, a small tea table between them. She held a cup of mint tea, tracing the rim with her fingers, and her gaze was steady and calculated. She'd rehearsed every word. She told him she thought it was time Tom received an honorary title, not to alter his role, just as a reward for his quiet contributions. The pitch was framed to reinforce Charles's image as a modern, inclusive king. And look, on the surface, that's a pretty clean argument. Tom Parker Bowles has never asked for anything. He's shown up at numerous events, caused no scandals, and maintains a useful network of connections. Camilla's point was that he's utterly loyal and unswayed by any factions. So far, so reasonable. But then Charles didn't respond right away. He sat down his cup, his eyes narrowed just slightly, and you could almost see the calculation happening in real time. The problem is that Tom Parker Bowles is not an official member of the royal family, nor does he carry direct royal blood. Granting him a title would break precedent, stir controversy, and invite criticism. The press would absolutely accuse them of favoritism, and Camilla had expected that. She leaned in, steady and composed, and her voice was soft, but every word landed with precision. She told Charles she'd handle the public narrative, turn it into a positive story of progress. Times have changed, she said. Granting Tom a title shows we value contributions regardless of lineage. She wasn't wrong about the optics, but what she didn't account for was Charles choosing duty over blood right there at that moment. He dismissed her plea before the Privy Council as if Tom meant nothing. That's the core of it. No one saw blood, but the wound ran deep. Trust was gone, and Camilla's crown started slipping the second she realized her husband wasn't going to back her play. Now, this is where it gets weird. Camilla didn't explode. That's not her style, at least not in public. She understood the cost of an emotional outburst in royal circles. One misstep, and she'd be painted as unstable, bitter, and power-hungry. Once that label sticks, the palace doesn't defend you. So instead, she adapted. She shifted from persuasion to precision. If Charles wouldn't give her what she asked for, she'd target what he valued most, and that was his image. Carefully, she activated a network she'd spent years cultivating, a few discreet phone calls to old media allies, journalists who owed her favors from another lifetime when she was just the mistress behind the curtain. There were debts, and she was collecting. The opportunity arose at a charity reception at Somerset House, with its ancient walls, flickering lanterns, and the Thames glinting like black glass outside. Inside were the usual crowd, donors, dukes, and reporters with long lenses and longer memories. Camilla arrived in ivory silk. Her smile was perfect. She was every inch the gracious royal consort, but beneath the charm, the anger was still there. She moved through the room with ease, chatting and laughing. However, her eyes kept scanning until they found him. A journalist from the Times, someone who remembered her from the day she was spoken of in whispers. She raised a glass of champagne, leaned in close, and said softly that Charles was increasingly relying on Princess Anne and William to handle public duties, quietly sidelining his own family. It's sad to see the royal family so divided. That mine was planted, and it spread. By morning, headlines had taken over the papers and the internet. Is the king taking sides? Charles favors William and Anne, neglects Camilla. The subtext wasn't subtle. They drew a contrast between the Diana camp and the new family, and Charles, intentionally or not, was choosing sides. The press played it up. Camilla and Tom, once visible, became conveniently forgotten. William and Anne were then cast as the favored heirs on the public stage. Online, a single hashtag caught fire: number royal divide. By evening, it was trending worldwide. And Camilla, she said nothing. Charles recognized Camilla's handiwork the moment he saw the first headline. He sat alone in his office at Buckingham Palace. Newspapers spread out across his mahogany desk. The warm glow of the desk lamp lit the pages. But his face had gone dark. The strategy was familiar. No direct attacks, just carefully worded insinuations, just enough to raise questions and stir discomfort. It was subtle and ruthless, and only one person had both the motive and the media connections to pull it off. Charles clenched his fist. The betrayal stung deeper than before. To the world, the king was supposed to be above family feuds, a national father figure. If the press framed him as favoring William and Anne while sidelining Camilla and Tom, it chipped away at that image. And worse, it made people wonder, was he still the king of unity or just the protector of Diana's bloodline? Among royalists, trust was fragile. Many had embraced Charles as a bridge between the old world and the new, but this narrative threatened to recast him as partial, divided, and weak. Inside the palace, the fallout was already taking shape. The court was splintering quietly. Factions that had always existed beneath the surface now had something to cling to. Some whispered support for Camilla. Others dismissed her as reckless. Charles could feel that every decision now risked being interpreted as favoritism. He was now managing a Cold War under his roof. Camilla hadn't shouted, she hadn't made a scene, and she didn't need to. She had simply planted a seed of doubt, enough to polarize him in the public eye without ever leaving her fingerprints. Outsiders would call it gossip, but Charles knew better. It was a warning to him, but he wouldn't let it continue unchecked. He summoned Camilla to Clarence House. The rain that afternoon was steady, the sky low and gray. Inside, the walls felt damp. The air was heavy. She sat across from him by the fire, calm as ever. Her expression was serene. Charles told her he knew exactly where those articles came from, his voice cold, his gaze locked on hers. He said it was a dangerous game and told her to stop it now before it harms them all. The royal family cannot afford another scandal. Camilla smiled, but her eyes were sharp. She told him she'd stop only if he agreed to grant Tom an honorary title. She said it was only fair. He humiliated her in front of everyone, and she was just protecting what's hers. Charles shook his head, jaw tight. His voice was firmer now. He told her she was pushing this too far, and he wouldn't yield to this kind of pressure. She didn't flinch. She said she wouldn't stop until he realized this family includes her and Tom, not just those with legitimate blood. And she stood with quiet resolve. She said if he didn't yield, she'd keep going, and he knew what she was capable of. Charles sat motionless, gripping the arms of his chair. A wave of helplessness crashed over him. He had hoped reason and affection would sway Camilla. However, she was no longer the gentlewoman he once knew. She had become a formidable adversary. He watched her leave, her steps steady on the polished wooden floor, and realized this conversation had driven them further apart. Camilla's next moves were bolder. The narrative spread like wildfire, from late-night BBC talk shows to social media posts, even tabloids like The Sun. She quietly enlisted anonymous sources, close friends who confirmed Charles's neglect of her. Their words added a tragic emotional weight to the story. Camilla, isolated in a cold palace, Tom ostracized despite his devoted service. She confided to a friend that she only wanted fairness for her son, but Charles seemed to have forgotten they were family. The effect went beyond her expectations. Public opinion began to swallow the story. Online polls showed a subtle dip in Charles's approval ratings. Camilla's image morphed into that of a victim, while Charles's reputation fractured, polarized between a fair king and a cold, biased father. Charles sat alone in his office, scrolling through online comments. His heart was heavy. In the weeks after their failed meeting, Buckingham Palace felt suffocating. The press hammered him relentlessly, painting Charles as distant, biased, a king favoring William and Anne while sidelining Camilla and Tom. BBC talk shows buzzed with debate, dissecting the royal divide. Analysts claimed he prioritized his son and sister, neglecting his current family. Meanwhile, old prejudices lingered. Camilla was still the other woman in many eyes, and that stigma fueled criticism on social media. The fire spread faster. Old family photos were reworked to highlight Charles's aloofness, reinforcing the narrative. Once hailed as a king of fairness, he was now seen by many as selfish, protecting only the lineage of his first marriage. Each morning, Charles read these articles, His hand trembled as he turned the pages. He knew if he didn't act, his reputation would be irreparably damaged. Worse, the monarchy risked its most significant crisis of confidence as Diana's death, so he couldn't wait any longer. In his private office at Buckingham Palace, Charles summoned his most trusted advisors. The desk lamp cast a harsh glow on Charles's face, highlighting stress lines carved by tension. He told them they needed to strike at her weakest point. His voice was low but firm. He ordered them to conduct an audit of all the charitable funds Camilla oversees, to leave no stone unturned. He wanted a detailed, discreet, and swift report. For some time, Charles had noticed something odd. Large sums were transferred to a shadowy consulting firm. There was no clear record of what they did. Out of trust, he had ignored it. Now he was determined to uncover the truth. His advisors nodded without question. The audit began immediately. A hand-picked team of independent auditors, with no royal ties, dove into the Queen's Outreach Fund. It was her biggest charity, focused on culture and social projects. They worked through the night at Windsor Castle. At first, the books appeared clean. They secured funding for initiatives benefiting poor children, heritage projects, and charity events. However, cracks appeared like fractures under a glossy surface. Funds were funneled to projects run by Tom Parker Bowles and Camilla's close circle. Hundreds of thousands of pounds were tied to restaurant events tied to Tom. All were labeled as British culture promotion. Lavish dinners at upscale London restaurants where Tom was head chef were known as community education. In reality, they boosted Tom's business network. More cleverly, some money was used by political advocacy groups. These groups pushed to expand Camilla's influence, using seminars as lobbying efforts to amplify her voice in national affairs. The auditors were stunned. They documented a $50,000 transfer to an organization run by one of Camilla's close friends. That money later funded a secret media campaign timed with the negative articles about Charles. They didn't find direct proof of corruption, but misuse was apparent. A public charity was being exploited for personal and political gain. This broke the royal family's strict financial rules. If this became public, the fallout would be massive, and Camilla's reputation would be destroyed. The press would feast on headlines: Queen misuses charity funds to secure title for son. Parliamentary investigations would follow, and the royal budget could face severe cuts. This could end Camilla's public career, turning her into an outright villain. Tom would be dragged down too, caught in the storm. One late evening, Charles sat alone in his office. The dim light flickered over thick stacks of papers. He flipped through the report, heart pounding with every page. His rational side smiled. He had found the perfect weapon to force Camilla to back down. But deep inside, Charles was anguished. As king, he could have divorced Camilla, stripped her of her title, and cut all ties the moment she started her campaign against him. Yet, he chose not to. In his heart, Camilla was his emotional anchor. In years of loneliness and criticism, to destroy her would be to tear his soul apart, turning his life into a new tragedy. He wanted to give her a chance to turn back. He hoped she'd see reason before ambition dragged her too far. But as she spiraled deeper, he had to find a weapon to restrain her. So he chose a quiet investigation, using what he had as leverage, a way to stop her without dealing a fatal blow. On a dreary, rainy afternoon, with London's sky as gray as his mood, Charles arrived at Clarence House unannounced. Rain hammered the roof of his sleek black limousine. He stepped inside, coat-drenched, face worn and tired. Camilla sat in her private drawing room, reading a book on royal history. As if nothing was wrong, the firelight flickered across her face, but did nothing to soften the tension between them. Charles said her name, his voice low and grave, sitting down across from her without waiting for an invitation. He told her he was there to issue a final warning. Her campaign was harming them all. She needed to stop it now before he was forced to act. Camilla put her book down, her gaze cold without fear or remorse. She asked if he thought empty words would make her stop. She was only protecting Tom and herself. If he agreed to grant the title, this would stop. But if he insisted on clinging to those outdated traditions, he shouldn't blame her for pressing on. Her tone was calm but sharp. She leaned forward, a faint smile playing on her lips. She told him he was worried about his image, and if so, he should concede. She hadn't done anything excessive. Just let the public see the truth. Charles stared at her, pain tightening his chest. He He had hoped to catch a flicker of regret, but found only cold resolve. He softened his voice, trying once more. He asked if she could see that this wasn't about Tom or tradition. It was about them, about the royal family. These rumors were tearing them apart, weakening his position. He loved her, but he couldn't let her destroy everything for a title. He paused silently, hoping his words would reach whatever was left of her affection. Camilla shook her head, her eyes still sharp. She told him if he loved her, he wouldn't have humiliated her in public. She said he was worried about his image, not about her or Tom. She wouldn't stop, not until he realized this family needs to change. She stood, her gesture signaling the end of the conversation. It was clear she didn't take his warning seriously. Turning to the window, she watched the relentless rain as if this meeting were just a brief interruption in her plans. With no resolution reached, Charles left Clarence's house, anger and frustration surging through him. Sitting in the car, he watched the rain pour down the windshield and realized he could wait no longer. Camilla was consumed by ambition, and words no longer held power. He had to act. On the drive back to Buckingham Palace, he called his private secretary. His voice was resolute. He ordered them to convene a confidential meeting with the Privy Council. That night, the meeting took place in a secluded room at Windsor Castle. The cold, secretive atmosphere was heavy. The dark walls, lit only by the faint glow of antique chandeliers, giving the room the feel of an underground tribunal. Only the most trusted council members were invited: Princess Anne, a few conservative ears, and loyal legal advisors. No official records were kept, and no outsiders were allowed. Everything had to remain confidential to prevent leaks. Charles sat at the head of the long table, his face stern under the flickering light, clutching the thick investigation dossier. He began, his voice calm but heavy with authority. He told the assembled ladies and gentlemen that they faced a grave internal issue. He had conducted an audit of the Queen's charitable funds, and the findings revealed undeniable irregularities. He slid the dossier toward the center of the table, letting the members examine it. They leaned forward, eyes widening with surprise and concern. Princess Anne raised an eyebrow and spoke quietly, saying this was more serious than she thought. Funds diverted to Tom's personal projects and political lobbying. Charles nodded, explaining the details. Indeed, these expenditures violate transparency regulations and could be seen as an abuse of power. If exposed, the royal family would be engulfed in scandal. But he didn't wish to make this public. That would harm them all. Instead, he proposed a discreet disciplinary measure: reduce Camilla's public role, transfer management of the funds to an independent oversight board appointed by the council, and restrict her access to royal budgets and media channels. Tension filled the room as members exchanged cautious glances, and one earl spoke up. This would curb her influence without causing a public stir. But will she accept it? Charles's voice was firm. She will have to. This is to protect the royal family, not to punish an individual. After a brief discussion, the proposal was approved by tacit consensus. No formal vote was taken. As Charles stepped out of the meeting, a knot twisted in his gut. He had crafted a careful trap to clip Camilla's wings. Yet, he couldn't shake the uneasy feeling that this move might shatter their marriage entirely. In the days that followed, Camilla began to notice the walls closing in. The invitations she usually received vanished without explanation. Meetings she once led now passed her by. She brushed off the small slights at first, thinking them mere coincidences. But one bleak morning at Clarence's house, her private secretary arrived with a pale face and hands trembling, carrying an official notice. The secretary said, voice barely steady, that Buckingham Palace had ordered the Queen's Outreach Fund transferred to an independent oversight board. All projects linked to Tom had been put on hold indefinitely. Camilla's fingers clenched the letter until the paper crumpled. That fund was the carefully built foundation of her influence, and Tom's events, once thriving, were now frozen in limbo. She moved to the window and saw only one culprit, Charles. Without delay, she reached out to a quiet ally inside the Privy Council. Their brief conversation confirmed her suspicions. Camilla's blood ran cold. The man she once trusted had weaponized the very system she helped build to suffocate her. Fury boiled beneath her skin. She stormed from Clarence's house and rode straight to Buckingham Palace. She burst into Charles's office, the door slamming behind her like a gunshot in the silence. The secretary outside jumped. Charles looked up, Surprise and exhaustion etched across his face. He started to say it wasn't the time, but she didn't let him finish. She demanded to know what she was doing there. She was there to confront the man who destroyed her, who drained her funds, and suspended Tom's projects. She told him he thought she wouldn't find out, that he used the council to stab her in the back, erased her from this palace. Her face burned with anger and hurt. She said he was the king, but he had no right to do this to her, to them. Charles rose slowly, his face calm, but eyes heavy with pain. He had braced for this moment, but not for the storm of fury now facing him. He circled the desk, searching for steady words to bridge the widening chasm between them. Camilla took a deep breath and steadied herself. She said it wasn't about destroying him, it was about protecting the royal family. He went too far with the rumors and the media campaigns. The investigation revealed irregularities in her funds, money being funneled into Tom's personal projects and political lobbying. If this leaks, it would be a disaster for all of them. He didn't want to make it public. He didn't want to hurt her. This step was necessary to stop everything. Their conversation quickly spiraled into a heated argument. Neither was willing to back down. Camilla shot back, accusing Charles of hypocrisy. She said he claimed it was about protecting the royal family, but he was really protecting his image. He was scared the public would think he favors William. He was afraid Anne and the conservatives would turn on him. But what about her? What about all the years she sacrificed for him? Tom doesn't deserve a title, but William gets everything. Her voice cracked, tears streaming down her cheeks. Charles's voice rose, tired and worn. He asked if she didn't get it. He gave her a chance. He warned her, but she kept pushing, forcing his hand. This wasn't about Tom or William. It was about principles. He reached out for her hand, but she pulled away sharply. Camilla stepped back, wiped her tears, and her tone turned icy. She told him he made her his enemy. She wouldn't forget this. He would regret it. In the quiet of Clarence House, Camilla flipped through her sparse schedule, heart sinking deeper into isolation. Rumors buzzed in the press and on social media about her disappearing act. The fallout hit Tom even harder. Royal support dried up, and business partners began to pull away. Camilla tried to comfort Tom, but her own heart ached. He had once been her connection to the outside world, but now he was the first casualty. A heavy sadness settled over her. She wandered the long corridors of Clarence House, once a symbol of her triumph and love, now a gilded prison. She saw clearly that Charles had chosen a quiet, ruthless punishment. He hadn't destroyed her, but he had pushed her out of the center of power, turning her into a faint shadow in royal history. Late at night, she sat alone by the fireplace, reflecting on the years she'd spent rising from a quiet mistress to a mighty queen and now slipping back into the shadows. Her pain came from loneliness and the betrayal of the man she had sacrificed everything for. On a foggy autumn evening, Camilla stood by a window at Clarence House, staring out at London's twinkling lights. The towering buildings shimmered in the drizzle, but looked distant and lifeless to her. She pressed her hand against the cold glass, her breath fogging the surface, and realized this was not the end. She had lost her status, her influence, maybe even her love, but a small flame still flickered inside her. She hadn't entirely given up. Maybe one day she would find a way to turn the tables. The game of the court was only paused, waiting for a new chance.